down things, write comments, everything you want to know. I'm here for you. So today our session is projects and project-based learning, principles and practice. For those of you who don't know who I am, as Andrea introduced me, thank you very much. I've been working with English teaching for almost 20 years now here in Brazil, and I consult for different institutions around the world. Nowadays, I teach at university here in Brazil, so I teach at the Catholic University of Paraná, in the south of Brazil, actually not very far from Argentina, So if you drive all the way to the west, you get to Argentina. And I've been teaching the University of Caxias do Sul. So that's further down in the south. So it's in Rio Grande do Sul. Again, very close to Buenos Aires. If you drive a little bit to the west, you get to Buenos Aires. I've been to Buenos Aires once in my life. I loved it. I really want to go back. I love tango. I love empanadas. I love everything. Good wine and everything you can get in Argentina. And I have been teaching English for a while now, but nowadays I specialize in training teachers in Brazil. So this is what I do. And I also offer consultancy to other schools around the world. So I help teachers change their practice. I basically help some teachers around the world pass exams, improve their linguistic competence and things like that. And this session in particular has everything to do with me, because as you will see, I will try to cover in less than 1 hour, so we can have some time for questions. What PBL? So what is the purpose? Where does it come from? What are the definitions and principles? Then why PBL? Why should we use it? Is there any evidence to support that PBL is better? What are the outcomes of our students when we work with PBL, project-based learning? When PBL? So think about the timing of PBL. Can I use PBL all the time? Depending on the structure of my school, of my class, maybe there's something else I can do. Maybe it's not PBL really, but it's working with projects, but it's good enough, So I will tell you the 4 levels of PBL according to my experience. Also, how PBL. So I'm going to show you a case study, actually 4 different cases, and you will help me try to think of the best way we can work with projects. And finally, I'm going to share a little bit of my experience, and then we have some time for questions. And I wanted to introduce myself properly now. So I'm André Hedlund. I am here because I love projects. And if you want to, you can find me on Instagram at EDCRocks. That's my profile on Instagram. But you can also find my blog, my website. So there are a lot of things I write there. I have some courses there as well. And I have written at least three blog posts about PBL and my experience with PBL. So this can be very helpful. So just go to edcrocks.com, okay? And like I said, let's get started. So I want you to help me now. You can use the chat box, or if you want to open your microphone, doesn't matter. But what is PBL? How can you define PBL? What is project-based learning? Does anybody know? Or do you feel like, maybe I don't know so much. Maybe I still need to learn. Yes, Cecilia just wrote, learning by projects. Yes. Anything else that comes to your mind? What else is PBL? Huh? Let's see. I'll give you 1 more minute to think, and then you can share in the chat box, or you can tell me. You can open your microphone and tell me. Doing research. Yeah, that's a very important part of PBL. Organized learning. Exactly. Wonderful. Anything else that comes to your mind? Because many different people have different ideas, concepts, definitions about PBL, right? Great. Let's see if anybody else have an, okay? Something missing in your sentence, Viviana. And yes, Maria Victoria, working together. That's a big part of PBL, collaboration. Yes, Viviana, now I got it. A result at the end, coming out with a product. All of those things are related to PBL, right? So basically, PBL is this. It's a very long quote, I know, but I think it's the best. It comes from a friend of mine, Catherine Billsborough. She has worked with the British Council. She publishes many ELT books. You know, she's a great person. And I don't know if you are watching me on your phone, so maybe you cannot read. So I will read with you so you understand what this is about. Okay, this is a very important definition of PBL. And it goes like this. Projects bring real life into the classroom. Instead of learning about how plants grow and all the language that goes with it, you actually grow the plant and see for yourself. It brings facts to life. The American educational theorist John Dewey wrote, education is not a preparation for life. Education is life itself. Project work allows life itself to form part of the classroom and provides hundreds of opportunities for learning. Apart from the fun element, project work involves real-life communicative situations, analyzing, deciding, editing, rejecting, organizing, delegating, and often involves multidisciplinary skills, which can be brought from other subjects. All in all, it promotes a higher level of thinking than just learning vocabulary and structures, right? So I really wanted to show this definition because it's very complete, I think. It's a little long, but if you think about it, I think it condenses a lot of what PBL is into basically one paragraph. And this is what I believe. Take a look at some of the key words that you have here, So if you look at the key words, you will see real life, right? So let me show you some of those key words. So real life is a key word. And then you have so it brings facts to life, right? It's not preparation for life, but it's life itself, right? It's also opportunities for learning. Take a look at that. It's fun. It involves real life communicative situations. And then you have multidisciplinary. That's very important, right? Other subjects. So a lot of keywords here for you to analyze, right? But of course, a lot of people ask me, okay, but how can we start with PBL? What is PBL really? There is a wonderful website that I always recommend, if you are a teacher teaching English, math, science, biology, doesn't matter, dance, anything you're teaching, go to this website. A long time ago, it was called Buck Institute for Education, but nowadays it's called PBL Works. So it's pblworks.org. So if you go to this website, you have every resource you need to talk about PBL, to use PBL. And they say that PBL is a teaching method in which students learn by actively engaging in real world and personally meaningful projects. Again, the element of real world, real life. Normally, when we teach, traditional schooling, traditional teaching, we don't care so much about the real world. That's secondary. We care about the content, right? Our students, they have to memorize a lot of things. But with PBL, the real life outside the classroom, that's very important. That's number one, because what they are doing in the classroom will help them perform a task or something outside of the classroom in real life for their community, So that's why PBL will normally look at the problems at the community. What's going on outside the school, outside the classroom? How can we use that so that we can learn English more effectively? So that's a big question in PBL, right? But of course, there are many questions you might be asking. Oh my God, why should I use PBL? I have been teaching like the way I teach for many, many years. Why should I change now? So why PBL? Think about 3 categories: time, materials, and assessment. The questions you might have are here. Does it take longer to prepare? Does it help students take advantage of their time? So let me ask you in the chat box, what do you think? Do you think planning a PBL curriculum takes longer? Yes or no? Is it more complicated? Let me know in the chat box. Cecilia, not necessarily, exactly. It doesn't have to take longer than a traditional lesson, for example, right? As a matter of fact, PBL is very student-driven. So it's the students who do a lot of the work. At first, maybe, Andrea said, right? Yes, maybe first you have to teach your students to get into the PBL mindset, to understand how PBL works. So maybe it takes time at the beginning. For me, and I will show you some of my experience, yes, that's exactly what happened. It took some time at the beginning. But then when they understand how PBL works, it takes less time usually, because they are the ones doing the hard work, researching, finding the things that we can use in the classroom, right? There's a big question at the beginning. And then the second question we might ask has to do with the materials. Can we still use the book when we learn from PBL, when we use PBL? Do we need to bring in lots of materials? So what do you think? Can you still use the book, the English book that you normally use to teach? That's a big question, right? Yes or no? What do you think? No, maybe not. Not only, right? So it's not just the book that you use in the classroom, but there are so many other things. Think about the book as a wonderful resource that you can still use. I mean, you don't have to completely discard the book. You can still use the book. Your PBL lessons can be based on the book, but the book is always a little late. The book is always a little late. The book has been published. Think about every book you've ever used in your life. It took a couple of years for the book to be published. I know, because I've been working on a book. I've been, helping write a student's book. So it takes a very long time. There are many people involved. And when the book is published, it's a little obsolete, a little outdated, because it's, something that took many years to happen. To give you a better example, think about COVID-19, the pandemic that we had. There was no English language teaching book anywhere that talked about the pandemic, because all of the books had been published before the pandemic, right? So there were no books. And then even today, it's hard for you to find books that talk about the pandemic, because, the pandemic was very recent, right? So that means that the book becomes a little outdated. When it gets published, it takes a little time for things to actually, for the students especially, to understand that, this is not what's happening today. This is what's happening 2 years ago, right? So yes, we can still use the book, but we also have to remember that PBL is very much about what's happening now, what's happening in the community. So we have to find other materials. And they could be digital materials, online materials, or they can be physical materials. It depends on where you're teaching. And assessment. So the two questions I put for you here is, do students learn more or do they learn less? Do students perform well on tests when they use PBL? Or, oh my God, if we don't cover all the content of the book, they're going to do worse on tests. Actually, they can do better. They can do the same, they can do better, they can do worse. It depends on many factors. But PBL is not automatically more difficult or worse for students in terms of their performance. The evidence that we have suggests that it's actually very good. So if we take a look at what's happening in academia, in science, research, new research makes a powerful case for PBL. So basically what they say is that the new gold standard studies provide compelling evidence that project-based learning is an effective strategy for all students, including historically marginalized ones. So that's excellent. That means that PBL can work really well. PBL can work exceptionally well if you know how to use it. But right now, I have to tell you a secret. PBL sometimes doesn't work. As a matter of fact, depending on where you teach and what your school wants from you, PBL might not be the best solution, because PBL is project-based learning. So that means it permeates the entire curriculum. And that's what people are doing wrong. When they work with a project at the end of the week, at the end of the unit, they're not working with PBL, they're working with projects. Those are two very different things, you know. PBL means that everything stems from this one big project. The whole curriculum is based on this one big project. It's not something you can do in a month. It's not something you can do in a couple of weeks. It's the entire semester. It's the entire year. So PBL is much bigger than what people normally think. However, like I said, maybe PBL is not the solution for you. You can still work with projects, and that's also very good. It's not PBL, or not the typical PBL we should see when we are trying to implement PBL, but it's working with projects. So today I'm going to show you examples of PBL, the way it should be, but also working with projects, because sometimes you need to start working with projects so you can actually do PBL. The first step is working with projects, then you can do PBL. Now, if you think about it, there are principles. So if you go to the literature, you know, the academic, scientific literature of PBL, you will find general, universal principles, let's say, for you to guide your students' PBL experience, okay? There are 5 main principles according to what I'm going to show you, okay? Actually, this is based on a wonderful video from Edutopia, okay? So I am going to write the name here on the chat box. Edutopia is a wonderful platform. It's a great website with, you know, the funny thing is, it was founded by George Lucas. Do you know George Lucas? Have you ever heard of George Lucas? You know, the creator of Star Wars. He was the founder. He is the founder of Edutopia. So it's a wonderful resource. It's a great website with articles, videos. So if you go to Edutopia on YouTube, so you type Edutopia and PBL, you are going to find probably 7, 8, 9 videos. There are wonderful videos teaching you how to use PBL. So I got this from a video, a PBL video on Edutopia, and it says that the 5 principles of PBL are: it needs to have a real world connection because it makes it relevant. Normally, when we are teaching, everything is very artificial and superficial. There's no real relevance. So when you make it about the community, about their real lives, then it becomes more relevant. Core to learning. So core to learning means the project is all about learning the language. You know, it's not just doing the project. The project is the means to learning the language, okay? So core to learning. Structured collaboration, and that's very important. Like you said, they work together in groups, you know? So your students will be working together, and that's why it's student-driven. So they are very independent, very autonomous. They have voice and choice. They can choose a couple of things in the project. That's why when you work with PBL, normally, if you are working with very, very young learners, it's very hard for you to structure because they are not very autonomous. They are not very independent. They need you to do basically everything for them. But if you're working with teenagers and adults, now they can do many things, right? They can structure the whole project. you have to monitor, you have to fiscalize, to oversee the project. And of course, there are some milestones, or let's say checkpoints, for you to see if the project is going well or not. So remember that. And one of the best things about PBL is multifaceted assessment. So it's not just normally, typically, how do we assess our students? There's a test. There's an essay, a composition, a writing task. There's an oral task, an oral test or something like that. So with PBL, you can have an exhibition at the end of the period, a product, like you said, right? And you can assess the product. You can also assess if they are on time, the deadlines, the milestones, if they are collaborating. So there's a lot of formative assessment going on here. It's not just the final product. It's not just a test and exam. There are many ways you can assess your students, right? So that's why PBL is very holistic. It looks at different things, the whole student, right? Also, there are very interesting, steps or stages, if you will, for PBL. And just to give you two examples here, I got one from the PBL Works website, which is the official source. But I also got this one from the Lincoln Elementary Vegetable Garden, right? So you see that many places, different schools, they reinvent, let's say, the PBL gold standard or the stages of PBL. And you will see that even though they have some differences, they are very similar, because everything starts with a challenging problem or question, or a driving question or challenge, right? That's how it starts. So there's a question or challenge, challenging problem or question. Great. Then you have inquiry. Inquiry is asking questions, questioning everything all the time, right? Then you have, take a look, both have student voice and choice. So PBL works better, not when you impose the project on your students, but when you give them the chance to brainstorm and think and select their own project, okay? But of course, the project has to answer the driving question, right? Then you have a lot of feedback and revision. So critique and revision, feedback, revision, critique, and revision. And finally, I wouldn't say the most important thing, the process is more important, but a sense of achievement through a public product, publicly presented product. So basically what you have is a driving question, inquiry, so that's research, asking questions, thinking critically, all of those things. And you have student voice and choice. They choose how to do it, okay? So if they cannot choose the project, at least they have to choose how to do it. Who is going to do what? And then a lot of feedback and revision. And finally, a product. That's it. There's an exhibition, right? So this is, well, let's say the stages of PBL. Okay, I'm convinced I'm going to use PBL, right? Now, I don't need I can stop my presentation now. But here's the big problem, the big question. When can I use PBL? Well, that's the challenge. I'm going to show you a couple of cases, like I promised. I worked in all of those cases, by the way, and you helped me out here. So time to get our hands dirty. Let's analyze 4 different scenarios. So let me show you the very first scenario. Think about this. Imagine this scenario. Your school, you work at a language center. You have 4 groups, 2 young learners, 1 teens, 1 adults. The groups are small, not more than 10 students. You see them twice a week for 1 hour and 30 minutes. You need to stick to the book syllabus, so you have to use the book. And you need to apply 3 pre-made tests each semester. Can you work with PBL? Yes or no? You have to use the book. You see them twice a week for 1 hour and 30 minutes, and you have to apply tests. Can you still work with PBL? Think about it, huh? What do you think? Yes or no? Why not, right, Cecilia? Why not? It could be possible, right? Now I'm going to show you another example. The other example goes like this. This is a little more complicated. You are the mentor of a bilingual program, and your company partnered with an international program provider. Wow. You are overseeing a project between two high schools. There's a group from Brazil and another from Mexico. Groups are larger, so around 30 students each. You liaise, so basically you coordinate things with coordinators and teachers. Both groups have to stick to the books, but their calendars are different. So they have the same material, but they're having different lessons, different days, right? And you can use the project as assessment for one group, but not for the other. Can you still work with project-based learning here? Why not, right? I think that's the answer. I'm going to show you how I worked with projects, okay? The other case is a little simpler. You were hired to design the curriculum of a short course for 300 high school kids. They have no book. So you see the difference? No book at all. Students are divided into groups of 30. So you have 10 groups of 30. You teach some groups and other 25 teachers work with you and they teach the other groups. It's an intensive course. So you have 8 hours of classes a day. It's a whole day with those kids. There doesn't need to be any type of formal assessment. So no tests, no nothing. Okay. Can you work with PBL here? And I think Cecilia summarized the answer. Why not? Why not, right? And finally, the last case goes like this. You were hired to design the curriculum of an immersion course for 80 adult learners. There are 4 groups, one A2, another B1, B2, and C1. Students are divided into groups of around 20. They must stick to the book, but adaptations are possible. You teach some groups and 4 other teachers work with you. It's an intensive course, so you have 8 hours of classes of a day, actually. Similar to the other one, but this one you have to stick to the book. And students need to be assessed through tests and something else that you choose. Can you work with PBL? Yes, you can work with PBL. Why not, right? I am going to show you now how you can work with PBL, with all of those groups. Actually, sometimes you will notice it's not really PBL. It's working with projects, but it's still possible. Still possible. When you work with PBL, like I said, the original PBL, you don't need to have a book necessarily. You don't need to have a lot of materials because the students will do the hard work. They will find things online. They will try to solve a problem in their communities, okay? So maybe you don't need lots of materials. You need a curriculum. Yes, of course you need a curriculum because the curriculum tells you what they should be learning, the language that they should be learning, the grammar that they should be learning, the vocabulary, the skills that they should be learning. But they can learn all of those things with many different projects, right? So it's not fixed. So that's PBL, and it takes time. It's a semester, it's a year. But for some schools, it might be very difficult. So it's better to work with projects and not with PBL. And that can help you in the future, because when you start working with projects, maybe your projects can become a little bit more sophisticated, more elaborate, and suddenly you are working with PBL. The first thing you can do is people to project. So here you have 4 levels of PBL. This is like a theory that I'm working on, and I'm going to publish this, So you have people to project, people to people, people to organization, and organization to organization. So you have 4 different levels. And to give you some examples, the first project I worked with was, that language institute that I had 4 groups. I had to stick to the book. I also had to give them tests. But I said, you know what? We're going to have a project that doesn't depend on the book. It's, let's say it's regardless of the book. The book is there, we do the lessons, we plan everything, perfect. But the project is happening on the side. And what was the project? As simple as this. What can you see in the pictures there, ladies? What caught your attention in the pictures, huh? Write in the chat box or tell me.
Love it.
Yes, Andrea knows him. Toys, but there is one toy in particular that should catch your attention, huh? And what toy is that? It's an elephant, exactly. So it's an elephant. So let me stop sharing my screen just for a second to introduce you ladies to the famous Mr. Trunk. There he is. Say hello to Mr. Trunk, ladies. Hello, Mr. Trunk. So by the way, if you are curious about Mr. Trunk, go to Facebook or Instagram, Mr. Trunk Travels. Mr. Trunk Travels. Look for the hashtag Mr. Trunk Travels, okay? So it can be on Instagram or Facebook. And leave a comment there. Say anything you want, okay? Do you know why? Because later tonight, well, during the week, I'm not going to select now, but during the week, I am going to look at your comments. I'm going to get your names. I'm going to sort your names, and I'm going to raffle a copy of my book. Huh? So you can get my book, The Owl Factor, Reframing Your Teaching Philosophy. So the only thing you have to do is go to Instagram, or Facebook, make sure you look for hashtag Mr. Trunk Travels, leave a comment there, anything you want, okay? And then during the week, I promise that I will select a winner, and then I will get in touch on social media with you, and then you will get a copy of my book, okay? So you can read. But Mr. Trunk was my first project, and it was a very simple project because basically it involved my students taking the little guy, this elephant, home, taking pictures, recording videos, creating authentic materials about their lives, you know, their parents, their families, bringing back to school. And then we use those materials. We use the recordings, we use the photos, and we discussed the photos, you know. What did you do with Mr. Trunk? What are you going to do? So the language, anything I wanted to teach them worked, because I could use Mr. Trunk for, you know, future with will or going to, or past, or anything worked. So that was the first project. People to project. You don't need anything. You just need people, and you have people. Your students are people. Their families are people. Their friends are people. And you need something that they will take home, that they will take pictures of, something. So it could be a mascot. It could be anything. And basically, our final product was a portfolio of Mr. Trunk's pictures and videos on social media. Nowadays, Mr. Trunk has been to 24 countries with my students, myself, my friends, and there are probably around 300 pictures of Mr. Trunk on social media because of this project, you know. So it's something simple you can do, and it works really well. You don't need a lot of preparation. You don't need a lot of materials, you know. But that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do for people to project, this is an example of me teaching some Italian students. That happened 2 years ago when I was in the middle of the pandemic, right? And I was preparing those students for a language certificate, so a proficiency exam, right? So we had to use the book. But parallel to that, every lesson, I met them 3 times a week. Every lesson, I reserved 15 minutes for them to discuss their project. I sent them to breakout rooms, and I decided that their projects are going to be anything they want. I don't care. They will have a lot of voice and choice. But every week, actually not every week, every 2 weeks, they had to present like a report of what they had done, okay? So they had to present that. And then at the end of our course, they had to show the project. So that was the exhibition moment, right? The final product. Guess what they did? I'm going to show you. So first of all, Salvatore and Giuseppe, actually Alessandro and Salvatore, they were Italian students. They decided to create a Formula One website because they love Formula One. They used Google Sites to create a Formula One website. And this is what they wrote. They said about, let me go back. About us, this website is managed by 2 Italian cousins, and it's born under the inspiration of André Hedlund, that's me, as a project during an English course. Thanks him, so, this was before I correct. So, but they did everything by themselves. And then I corrected, of course, right? But thanks him for the inspiration he gave us. Here is his blog. And we are on the safest messaging app to inform you in the safest possible way, whatever. They started a Telegram group, so a Telegram group to give people information about Formula One. And this was 2 years ago. Even today, they post things on that group, So the project is still going. And 2 other groups. One group decided to make this wonderful scientific magazine on Canva. So they did, because I like science, and I think maybe I infected them a little bit with my science geekiness, and then they started doing science projects. The other group, and they created a wonderful magazine, a scientific magazine. The other group decided to talk about the history of guitars, because one of the students, a girl, she was a singer, and a boy, he was a guitar player. So they got together. I only had 6 students in this group, right? So it was easier for me, of course, but they decided to talk about guitars. So basically the final product, when we arrived, at the end of the course, they presented those projects. I took notes, I gave them a grade, I gave them feedback, and that's how I assessed them, right? So that's people to project. But there's more, right? There's people to people. You don't need anything. You just need people. You just need other people. And there are 2 projects here. One was so famous that it was published in this book. So my project got published in this TESOL Press book, New Ways in Teaching Speaking, because it was really nice and it worked really well. But basically, the project was learn about people and cultural differences. So I connected my students with people from all over the world. I didn't connect them directly because they were teenagers. So I was the one controlling everything. So they were connected through me. I didn't give my students people's phone numbers or anything like that. No. So it was always through me, on my phone, on my social media. They never got in touch with them. But there was a Anya from Poland and Amna from Israel. Anya got interviewed by my B2 students. And, you can see the conversation here, which was, they loved you, haha, what did they say? She's cool, fun, social, and sympathetic, and she has a cat. That's what my students said. We liked her cat, Alo is the name of her cat. Very sociable. I'm glad they enjoyed. If you needed me sometime, then I'm in. So that was Amna. They were older, so they could interview Amna. Amna was in my class for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. My students asked her questions, and that's it. That was a project, getting to know different people from around the world, writing about them, profiling them so that you can have a portfolio by the end of the semester, and then tell what you've learned from all those cultures, right? The other group was an A2, so they were very young, and Amna is from Israel. We called her, but she was sleeping because it's a 6-hour difference, So she was sleeping. We called her. She was sleeping. Can I call you? Video call. Are you ready? Oh, thought you forgot. Yes, ready. Thank you. Thanks. Sorry to wake you because I woke her up. She was sleeping in the couch. But my students, the lesson that we had to do was there is, there are, and refrigerator items, like eggs, milk, juice, whatever is in your refrigerator. Guess what we did? I called Amna on WhatsApp, video call. She went to her refrigerator in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and my students asked questions like, are there eggs in your fridge or something like that? And she would show the video. She would turn the cell phone. Yes, there are eggs, you know. It was a fun lesson. And then she says, oh, they were shy. Oh, you were a great teacher. I had a lot of fun. And this was one example of the whole project. The whole project was getting to know people from around the world. I called other people. One example is this clock thing that I made here. So you can see that this is the project that went to New Ways in Teaching Speaking. Time zones, I call the project. So it was very basic. A1 students, they were learning how to tell the time. They were learning how to tell the time. They were 9, 10-year-old students. We decided to call a couple of my friends all over the world for my students to introduce themselves, for my friends to introduce themselves to my students, and for my students to ask what time it was, where they were. So we called Lucia in Cusco in Peru. We called Rachel in Wyoming, the United States. We called Marion in Washington, D.C., in the United States. We called Clayton in Dublin, Ireland. And by the way, today's St. Patrick's Day, so let's celebrate. And we also called, I think we called Valdeir in Stuttgart, Germany. And we called a friend in Iraq. You know, Afra as a friend I made in Iraq. So basically, my students introduced themselves. My friends introduced themselves. So they, hi, my name is, how are you? I'm fine.
Are you still there, André? He may have not.
The other two levels to finish.
We lost you. Sorry, we lost you for 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. So can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
yes, yes.
So
I thought
so
it was
was
my
just...
connection.
No, I thought maybe it was mine. I'm sorry. But I was just saying that the project was to call my friends from other countries. I mean, some of them were Brazilian, but they were all over the place, and ask what time it was and go to the clock and show the time. So my students were very shy, but they did it. It was a wonderful experience. And I think they learned more. And finally, the two last levels that I want to show you, people to organization. There are organizations around the world that can help you connect your students with other students to work on projects together. One organization that I became a fan of, let's say, IRN. IRN is, I'm trying to remember, International Education and Resource Network, IRN, okay? So here is a conversation that one of my students, Gustavo, had with Eileen, who was in China. So Gustavo here in Brazil, in Goiânia, in the Midwest of Brazil, he's talking, and he was A2 level, but he had a conversation about what time do you go to school? And Eileen, 6 in the morning, that's really early. What time do you go home, you know? So they were exchanging things. We had a conversation with some students from Pakistan, you know. There were students from Bulgaria as well. So my students, they basically the whole product at the end of this project, you know, was what have you learned from those people, from those cultures, you know? So there was a report, there was a mini video, like a mini documentary that we made. I helped them, right? But they had to speak. There was a show and tell moment for the families, you know? So I remember Gustavo talking about Eileen in front of everybody when we finished the project, right? So that's people to organization. Now, the biggest, most daring project I was involved in was organization to organization, because I was part of an organization that helped schools implement bilingual programs, okay? So there are regular schools, and they teach maybe 1 or 2 hours of English a week. When they implement a bilingual program, they teach 4, 5, 6, 7, even 10 hours of English a week. And we help them make the transition, okay? So we had that. And there was a partner in Mexico, Moebian. That's the name of the company. They did the same thing in Mexico. They helped schools implement bilingual programs. In our school and the school in Mexico, they were using the exact same material. They were teenagers. They were preparing for, an experience abroad, a high school experience, or even college experience in the United States or in Canada. And they were using the ACT GAC books. Okay, so basically, our high school in Brazil and the high school in Mexico, they were using the exact same material. The problem is that the calendar was a little off. The Mexicans were like 1 week ahead of the Brazilians or something like that. But, and of course, they had to do everything in the book. But we had a lot of meetings. I trained the Mexican teachers. I got some Brazilian teachers on board. And there were meetings that the students had to schedule. And we said, every 15 days, you have to have a meeting with your Mexican Brazilian partners to decide how you're going to use the projects. Guess what happened? Amazing. I created a book, like an ebook for the students and the teachers, giving tips, recommendations of how to use projects. At the end of this semester, by the way, the big project was working with NGOs, non-governmental organizations, okay? And many of those NGOs, they have an office in Brazil and in Mexico and in many other countries like Amnesty International, Greenpeace, the Red Cross. So there's so many. And by the end of this period, that was the best PBL experience I had. They had worked on a huge project together. They had found a way to work together. They learned so much. And they had to record a report, a video report of how they managed to work together. And I remember many students said, now I have Brazilian friends for life. Now I have Mexican friends for life, because I met them. And it was very nice. I remember that I cried a little bit, it was because it was very emotional, but that's what we did. And finally, I wanted to end this talk with Mitchell Resnick's Lifelong Kindergarten book, which is amazing. I think everybody should read this book. And he says that by providing young people with opportunities to work on projects based on their passions, in collaboration with peers, in a playful spirit, we can help them prepare for a world where creative thinking is more important than ever before. That's it, ladies, okay? So do you have any questions? I really hope you start working with projects. That's it for me. And by the way, remember, Mr. Trunk Travels on Facebook or Instagram, and I will select somebody to get a copy of my book, okay? Yes, The Owl Factor. But that's it. I think my final message is work with projects. If you don't know how to use PBL, because PBL takes time. Yeah, a lot to think, right, Maria? Exactly. PBL takes time. It's a little bit more complex. When I started working with PBL, it didn't work very well. I had to stop and start again the next semester. And then I said, let me start with a project, a small project. It could be a month's project. It could be a project at the end of the unit. Some books, they have a project at the end of the unit. So I started learning from those projects until I said, let's try a longer project, but simple, not something very complicated. And then Mr. Trunk came, so it was simple. It was something everybody could do. Everybody was excited to grab Mr. Trunk, take him to their farm, to the beach, to travel with Mr. Trunk. And that became the project. And then the second step that really helped me work with PBL was people. So I am everywhere on social media, Facebook, WhatsApp. I'm on different WhatsApp groups, with teachers from all over the world. And I connected my students with their students, and then basically throughout the semester, the book would say, okay, this is the unit. We have to learn about means of transportation, for example. I don't know, means of transportation. And then I would get somebody from Israel or from Poland or from Bulgaria or from Argentina or I don't know. And my students would have to interview the teacher or the students and talk about what type of transportation do you use to go to school, to get back home. So basically, it was my students talking to real people, right? Yes, somebody asked a question in the chat box. You mentioned something like it. Yes, so it's IEARN, okay, Viviana? IEARN, I think it's .org. IEARN, it's International Education and Resource Network. You have to pay something, an annual fee, but I remember when I paid that, it was, let's think about in dollars. It was like, I don't know, it was like $10 a year. $10 a year for you to use all the products. It was not very expensive. Maybe it could be a little bit more now because I haven't used in some time, but it's very, very much worth your time, okay? That's it, ladies, okay? No questions? Okay, so thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure. I hope that you start working with projects. And if you do, let me know how it goes, okay? Go to my website, you find texts, there are some videos, and if it doesn't work, don't give up. Try a different project, try something else. I'm sure you can find your way, okay? But that's it. Thank you very much, Andrea, for inviting me, all right? Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you, Viviana, Samara. D. Rodriguez, I don't know what your first name is. Mariela, thank you very much. So, bye-bye, all right? Thank you, Andrea. Bye-bye, thank you. I think your microphone is, yeah. Open your microphone. Okay,
yes.
now, okay, yes.
Well, I was trying to say something, but I couldn't. Well, first of all, thank you very much for this great information and this session, André. Much. Well, I would like before you leave to tell Andre if you have already used this approach in your lessons, and if so, in which way? What was your project?
Yes. So like I said, I had many different projects, but I think the most successful project was Mr. Trunk and traveling around the world, talking to people and getting to know their culture a little bit more. That was very successful. And there was a project that I did recently that basically, the 300 high school kids that I showed you the school. Basically, it was because I only had 2 weeks with them. So it was a very short project, and it was global competencies, public speaking, collaboration. So it was a very open project, but they had to present something involving that. So that was it. And it's very flexible. You can choose different projects. It depends on your community. It depends on what your students are interested in. So you have to try and then let me know how it goes. I'm sure you can find the one that works for you, okay?
Okay. Well, Andre, did you tell the teachers about the book?
Yes, so my book is available. You can take a look. And again, make sure you go to social media. I will select one, okay? I promise. I will take a look. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, I will be sending you by Eventbrite, or maybe you can get it through the group as well. I think that you are all in the VIP group, so I will be contacting you to send you the material and also the certificate of today's webinar. So, well, I hope to see you on the next one.
Thank you, Cecilia.
On the 1st of April with Luciana Fernández, also talking about making CLIL a classroom reality. So, well, see you on the 1st of April. Thank you very much.
See you all. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Hello. So I would like to apologize with you all because I think that André thought that the session was only about an hour. So I will be sending you the invitation to the following session as well without any charge. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.